Lieutenant Amara Johnson stares at the jury as the verdict is read, blood still caked under her fingernails. The white police officer she disabled smirks from his wheelchair. Her attorney whispers, "They found the dashcam footage." The courtroom. Doors burst open. Everything changes now. Before we dive deeper into this shocking courtroom drama, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you believe in justice and subscribe to follow Lieutenant Johnson's fight against corruption and racism. Can an elite black Navy SEAL win against a system designed to protect its own? Let's find out. Lieutenant Amara Johnson gripped her steering wheel tightly as she navigated the familiar streets of Chicago's South Side. At 42, with 18 years as a decorated Navy SEAL, she'd faced danger in war zones across the globe. But something about being back in her old neighborhood always put her on edge. The visit with her mother had gone well. The older woman's health was improving after her recent surgery, but Amara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as she drove through the dusk-lit streets. She checked her rearview mirror for the third time in as many minutes, military instincts never quite dormant. The flash of red and blue lights confirmed her suspicions. Amara sighed, pulling over to the curb with practiced precision, placing both hands visibly on the wheel as she'd learned to do long ago, not as a soldier, but as a black woman in America. Through her mirror she observed the officer approaching, white male, mid-30s, walking with the distinctive swagger that set off warning bells in her mind. His nameplate read Rhodes as he tapped on her window. "License and registration," Officer Brendan Rhodes demanded without preamble, his tone already carrying an edge that seemed disproportionate to a routine traffic stop. Amara nodded, her voice steady and respectful. "May I ask what I'm being pulled over for, officer?" Rhodes's jaw tightened. "Taillights out and you were doing 43 in a 40 zone." The taillight excuse was transparent. Amara had checked all her lights just yesterday, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm going to reach for my documents now, sir," she announced, moving slowly toward the glove compartment. "Rhodes's—" hand shifted to his holster. "Just keep your hands where I can see them." Amara froze, then carefully extracted her military ID along with her license. "I'm active duty military, sir. Lieutenant Amara Johnson, Navy SEALs." Rhodes snorted, examining her identification with obvious skepticism. "Navy SEAL? Right. And I'm the Secretary of Defense." His dismissal was immediate, contemptuous. "Women aren't SEALs, and definitely not—" He caught himself, but Amara knew exactly what word he'd swallowed. "This ID looks fake," he continued, his voice hardening. "Step out of the vehicle." Amara maintained her composure, though her heart rate accelerated. "Sir, that ID is authentic. You can verify with my commanding officer. I'm returning from visiting my mother, who's recovering from surgery." Rhodes's face darkened. "I said, step out of the vehicle. Now." As Amara carefully complied, she noticed he hadn't called in her information, standard procedure for any traffic stop. This realization, coupled with his escalating aggression, triggered her threat assessment training. Something wasn't right. Standing beside her car, Amara maintained a non-threatening posture despite her athletic 6-foot frame. "Sir, I'd like to contact my commanding officer. There seems to be some confusion." "Shut up!" Rhodes snapped, circling her like a predator. "Put your hands on the hood, spread your legs." As she complied, Amara's mind raced through possible scenarios. 2 weeks ago, she'd testified against Miltech Industries, a defense contractor, with deep connections throughout Chicago's power structure, including law enforcement. Her testimony had exposed millions in fraudulent billing and substandard equipment that had resulted in troop casualties. She'd received threats afterward, but hadn't expected such blatant intimidation. Rhodes's began an unnecessarily rough pat-down. "What's this?" he demanded, finding the outline of her phone. Without waiting for a response, he yanked it from her pocket, scrolling through it. "Sir, you need a warrant for that," Amara stated calmly. His response was immediate, a hard shove that slammed her against the vehicle. "You think you know the law better than me?" Typical entitled attitude. When Amara didn't react to the provocation, his aggression escalated. "I think you've got drugs in this vehicle, military types, thinking you're above the law." He turned toward his patrol car. "I'm calling for a K9 unit." Amara knew there would be no K9 unit. This was about intimidation, not law enforcement. "Sir, I'd like to speak with your supervising officer. This seems excessive for a traffic violation." Rhodes spun back, his face contorted with anger. "You calling me a liar?" He moved closer, intentionally invading her space. "Maybe you military folks think you're special, but to me, you're just another perp." His hand moved to his weapon again. "Maybe one with contraband or a weapon." The threat was unmistakable. In that moment, Amara made a split-second assessment. Rhodes's body language, positioning, and escalating aggression presented clear danger signals she'd been trained to recognize. When he suddenly reached for her arm with his left hand, while his right moved toward his holster, her SEAL training activated instinctively. Amara moved with precision honed through thousands of hours of combat training. A controlled strike to Rhodes's wrist, disrupting his draw. A sweep of his legs as he reacted. A precise application of pressure to control his descent. It was over. In seconds. Clean, efficient movements designed to neutralize without excessive force. But as Rhodes hit the ground, there was a sickening crack. His scream pierced the night as his body twisted unnaturally. Amara immediately shifted to first aid mode, stabilizing his neck while reaching for her phone to call for medical assistance. She hadn't intended to cause serious injury, just to prevent an imminent threat, but she could tell from his inability to move his legs that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had witnessed the confrontation and called 911. Within minutes, the street filled with patrol cars, officers emerging with weapons drawn. "Hands up, on your knees, now!" Amara complied immediately, attempting to explain. "He needs medical attention, possible spinal injury. I'm Lieutenant Amara Johnson, Navy." "Shut up!" an officer shouted, roughly forcing her to the ground despite her compliance. As handcuffs bit into her wrists, Amara watched paramedics rushing to Rhodes, who was now surrounded by concerned colleagues. Not one officer was listening to her explanation. The narrative was already forming in their eyes. Aggressive black woman attacks police officer. As they loaded her into a patrol car, Amara caught a final glimpse of Rhodes's being carefully placed on a stretcher, his eyes finding hers across the distance. Despite his pain, she saw something unexpected there, not fear or anger, but a cold calculation that sent chills down her spine. "This isn't over," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else as the door slammed shut and the patrol car pulled away from the scene, carrying her toward a system she knew all too well wasn't, designed to protect people who looked like her. 6 hours. That's how long Lieutenant Amara Johnson had been sitting in the holding cell, still in her civilian clothes, denied her constitutional right to a phone call. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the graffiti-scarred walls. Each time she requested her call, the officers conveniently became busy or simply ignored her. Her military training had prepared her for captivity situations, but she never imagined using those mental fortitude techniques in her own country, arrested by those sworn to uphold the same constitution she'd risked her life defending. The click of expensive shoes on linoleum finally broke the monotony. A tall, polished white man in a tailored suit approached, flanked by 2 detectives. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he studied her through the bars. "Lieutenant Johnson, I'm District E." "Attorney Victor Reynolds, you've caused quite a stir tonight." Amara stood, maintaining the dignified posture ingrained through years of military discipline. "I've been requesting my phone call for 6 hours, Mr. Reynolds. Why is the district attorney personally handling a traffic stop incident?" Reynolds's smile tightened. "A traffic stop incident? Is that what you call assaulting an officer and breaking his spine? Officer Rhodes may never walk again because of you." He signaled to a guard. "Open it up." Inside the interrogation room, Reynolds placed a folder on the table between them. "You're being charged with aggravated assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and attempting to evade a lawful traffic stop. Given your military background, I'm also considering additional charges related to the use of specialized combat techniques." Amara maintained her composure. I acted in self-defense when Officer Rhodes escalated a routine stop and threatened me with deadly force. I've requested legal representation and my phone call repeatedly. Reynolds leaned forward. You know what the media's already calling you? The South Side Savage. Channel 8's running footage of Officer Rhodes's wife crying beside his hospital bed while their 2 children clutch his uniform. He tapped the folder. Your so-called exemplary military record won't help you here. You're looking at 20 years minimum. A knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal a petite Asian-American woman in a sharp business suit. This interview is over, she announced, placing her briefcase on the table with authority. I'm Rebecca Chen, Lieutenant Johnson's attorney. You've violated my client's rights by denying her legal counsel for over 6 hours, Mr. Reynolds. Reynolds's face hardened. Miss Chen, I wasn't aware the lieutenant had secured representation so quickly. The Navy takes care of its own, Rebecca replied coolly. I'll need the room, please. After Reynolds reluctantly departed, Rebecca turned to Amara. Former JAG prosecutor, your commanding officer contacted me directly. Captain Marcus Davis sends his regards and wants you to know the Navy is fully behind you. Amara felt a wave of relief at the mention of her CO. Thank you, they've been painting a picture already. The media is being fed a narrative, Rebecca finished, opening her laptop. Let's create our own. Tell me everything from the beginning. As Amara recounted the events, Rebecca took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Amara finished, Rebecca's expression was grim. They're moving extraordinarily fast on this case. Reynolds taking personal interest, the media narrative already established. Something bigger is happening here. Miltech, Amara suggested. 2 weeks ago, I testified against them in a federal investigation. Their equipment failures cost 4 soldiers their lives. They have deep connections in Chicago law enforcement. Rebecca nodded. That tracks, but we'll need evidence of the connection. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Marcus Davis, his dark skin contrasting sharply with his immaculate white naval uniform. Despite the circumstances, Amara felt her spirits lift at the sight of her commanding officer. Lieutenant, he said formally, before breaking into a rare smile. You look terrible. Thank you, sir. I feel worse. Davis turned to Rebecca. What's our next move? Bail hearing in 2 hours, Rebecca replied. They'll push for remand, claiming she's dangerous and a flight risk. Davis's expression darkened. Lieutenant Johnson has served this country with distinction for 18 years. 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star. She stayed to face enemy fire when others ran. The idea she'd flee is insulting. While they prepared for the hearing, the machinery against Amara accelerated. The police union president gave a press conference, calling her a dangerous individual who exploited her military training to nearly kill a dedicated officer. Local news ran with the story, focusing on Officer Rhodes's exemplary record while emphasizing Amara's aggression. Most stations showed her booking photo beside an old military photo where she looked particularly stern, creating a visual narrative of an angry black woman. Rebecca managed to secure bail despite the prosecution's vehement arguments, but the conditions were severe: house arrest, electronic monitoring, and immediate suspension from active duty pending trial. As they left the courthouse, they faced a gauntlet of reporters shouting questions. Lieutenant Johnson, did you intend to paralyze Officer Rhodes's? Do you think your military training makes you above the law? Rebecca guided Amara through without comment, but the damage was evident. The narrative was being controlled and not in their favor. Later that evening, as Rebecca drove Amara home, she shared disturbing news. Rhodes's body camera footage is supposedly corrupted. Convenient, isn't it? Amara wasn't surprised. And the dashcam. They claim it malfunctioned earlier that day. Rebecca turned onto Amara's street. I've submitted requests for footage from any nearby security cameras and filed motions to access Rhodes's disciplinary record. My contact in the department hinted he's had multiple complaints for excessive force, particularly against minority drivers. As they approached Amara's townhouse, both women fell silent. spray painted across the front door in vivid red letters, was a single word: criminal. Amara stared at it, her expression unreadable. Captain Davis, who had followed in his own vehicle, surveyed the vandalism with controlled anger. "I'll station MPs here tonight," he said, his voice tight. "This crosses a line." Amara shook her head. "No, sir. That's exactly what they want. To escalate this further." She turned to face them both, her resolve hardening. "If they're going to paint me as a criminal, we need to show them what a real fight looks like." Rebecca nodded, understanding the steel beneath Amara's calm exterior. "They've chosen the battlefield," she said, "but we'll dictate the terms of engagement." As twilight descended on the vandalized home, the three stood united against the forces aligning against them, knowing that the real battle had only just begun. The red letters gleamed in the fading light, not as a mark of shame, but as a declaration of war against a system that had targeted the wrong soldier. Rebecca Chen spread dozens of files across her office conference table, creating a tapestry of evidence that was beginning to reveal a disturbing pattern. For 2 weeks, she'd been methodically building Lieutenant Amara Johnson's defense, working 18-hour days fueled by righteous indignation and strategic determination. The wall behind her was covered with photographs, timelines, and connection maps, a war room dedicated to exposing the truth. "Look at this," she said to Amara, who sat reviewing witness statements. "Officer Rodez has pulled over 38 black drivers in the past month, compared to only 7 white drivers. And of those 38, 23 resulted in searches or citations, while none of the white drivers received anything more than warnings." Amara nodded, unsurprised but still disturbed by the statistical confirmation of what she'd experienced firsthand. "Can we use this in court?" "Absolutely. I've also received an anonymous package." Rebecca carefully opened a manila envelope, revealing printed emails and internal police department memos. Someone inside the department is troubled enough by what's happening to risk their career. These documents show a pattern of targeting drivers in specific neighborhoods, predominantly black and Hispanic areas, under the guise of proactive policing. Amara leaned forward. "Rodez's name? All over it. But there's more." Rebecca pulled out a particular memo. 3 of the officers involved in this initiative previously worked private security for guess who? Miltech Industries. Amara finished, the pieces connecting. "Including Rodez?" Rebecca nodded. 2 summers ago, 6-month contract when he was on leave from the department. Their strategy session was interrupted by Captain Marcus Davis, who entered carrying a thick folder bearing Navy insignia. "Lieutenant, Johnson's complete service record," he announced, placing it before Rebecca. 18 years of exemplary service, Medal of Honor nomination for the extraction operation in Yemen, commendations from 3 different Secretaries of Defense, highest marksmanship and combat proficiency scores in her class. He looked at Amara with undisguised pride. "If they want to make this about her character and training, we'll bury them in evidence of her discipline and judgment." Rebecca skimmed the impressive document. "This is gold, Captain, thank you." The news that evening painted a different picture. Footage showed Officer Brendan Rodez being wheeled into a specialized rehabilitation facility, his wife, Jennifer, clutching his hand as doctors delivered a somber prognosis. "At this time, we're not certain if Officer Rodez will ever regain the use of his legs," the neurologist stated for the cameras. The spinal trauma was severe. Jennifer Rodez, blonde and tearful, faced the reporters. "My husband was just doing his job, keeping our streets safe. Now our children have to watch their father struggle to even sit up in bed, all because someone trained to kill decided the law didn't apply to them." The following morning, District D. Attorney Victor Reynolds called Rebecca directly, his tone falsely conciliatory. "In light of Officer Rodez's deteriorating condition, I'm prepared to offer Lieutenant Johnson a deal. Guilty plea to a reduced charge of assault, 5 years, possibility of parole in 3. Rebecca scoffed. "My client acted in self-defense against an officer who targeted her and escalated a routine traffic stop into a life-threatening situation. We're not interested." Reynolds' voice hardened. "You're making a mistake, Chen. Judge Howard Pierce has been assigned to this case. He's a former prosecutor with deep ties to law enforcement. He won't look kindly on your client's actions." After hanging up, Rebecca researched Judge Pierce extensively, a 65-year-old white male with a consistently conservative record, particularly harsh on defendants in cases involving police officers. His brother had been a police captain, and his campaign for judgeship had been heavily supported by the police union. The odds were stacking up against them, but the media narrative began showing cracks as Amara's military colleagues spoke out. Fellow SEALs, commanding officers, even veterans she'd served with in combat zones, came forward with stories of her judgment, discipline, and integrity. A Pulitzer-winning photographer shared images of Amara carrying an injured Afghan child to safety under enemy fire. The counter-narrative was building momentum. This shift provoked a new wave of attacks. Jennifer Rhodes gave an emotional interview, claiming Amara had destroyed their lives, and suggesting the Navy was covering up previous violent incidents in Amara's past. The accusations were vague but damaging, designed to sow doubt about Amara's character. Meanwhile, Rebecca worked tirelessly to identify other drivers who had encountered Officer Rhodes's. 3 came forward with similar stories of aggressive escalation, unnecessary searches, and racial slurs. All 3 were people of color. None had filed official complaints, fearing retaliation or believing nothing would come of it. As the pressure mounted, Amara began experiencing flashbacks to combat situations, moments where split-second decisions meant life or death. One night, the sound of a car backfiring sent her diving for cover in her own living room. The psychological toll of being painted as a villain for using the very training that had saved American lives was beginning to show. "The hardest part," she confided to Rebecca during a late-night strategy session, "is that I'm trained to neutralize threats while minimizing casualties. That's exactly what I did. If I'd wanted to hurt him severely, he wouldn't be giving interviews." From a wheelchair, Rebecca squeezed her hand in understanding. "I know, and we'll make sure the jury knows it too." Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. While reviewing Officer Rhodes's employment history, Rebecca discovered he hadn't just worked security for Miltech. He'd specifically been assigned to the division Amara had testified against. "This isn't coincidence," Rebecca said, eyes wide, with realization. "You were targeted, Amara, deliberately. This was retaliation." She grabbed her phone, dialing rapidly. "We need to meet, tonight. I found something that changes everything." Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone abused their authority? Comment number 1: if you believe police officers who target civilians based on race should face serious consequences. Hit the like button if you think Lieutenant Johnson was right to defend herself using her military training. Make sure you're subscribed to see how she and attorney Rebecca Chen will use this breakthrough evidence to fight back against the corruption. What do you think will happen when the truth about Officer Rhodes's connection to Miltech Industries comes to light? Will the judge allow this evidence in court? Let's continue with Lieutenant Johnson's fight for justice. The downtown parking garage was deserted at 11:30 at night, Rebecca's footsteps echoing between concrete pillars as she made her way to the designated meeting spot. Lieutenant Amara Johnson followed several paces behind, scanning for any sign of surveillance or threat. Their informant had insisted on extreme caution. "Are you sure about this?" Amara whispered, military instincts on high alert. Rebecca nodded. "My source is reliable. Former prosecutor who worked under Reynolds before ethical concerns drove her out. A figure emerged from the shadows, a black woman in her early 30s with intelligent eyes and a cautious demeanor. Rebecca Chen. I'm Zoe Parker, investigative, journalist with the Tribune." She glanced at Amara. "Lieutenant Johnson, your case landed on my desk 3 weeks ago, but it goes much deeper than a traffic stop gone wrong." Inside Zoe's car, protected from potential listening devices, she revealed what months of investigation had uncovered. Miltech Industries has been channeling funds through the police union's charitable foundation for years. In exchange, they get security contracts, information on federal investigations, and occasionally, she looked directly at Amara, targeted intimidation of whistleblowers. She pulled out a tablet, showing them a complex web of financial transactions. "After your testimony, Miltech CEO Gregory Winters had a private meeting with Police Union President Michael Donovan. 3 days later, your name and vehicle description were flagged in the patrol system for the Southside District. Amara's expression remained controlled, but her eyes reflected the gravity of the revelation. So Rhodes was following orders. Not exactly, Zoe corrected. Officers like Rhodes aren't directly told who to target. They're given special attention notices about vehicles that might be involved in criminal activity. It maintains plausible deniability while ensuring the target gets stopped. Rebecca shook her head in disgust. And District Attorney Reynolds, where does he fit? Reynolds has received over $200,000 in campaign donations from companies owned by Miltech board members. He's also expected to run for governor next year, with their backing. Zoe hesitated. There's more. Rhodes's former partner left the force last year. Name's Thomas Gallo. He's willing to testify that Rhodes regularly profiled drivers and had a particular hostility toward military personnel of color. Apparently, Rhodes was rejected by the Marines in his youth and carries a grudge. This potential witness represented a significant breakthrough, but the risks were escalating. The following night, Amara returned home from a meeting with her Navy psychologist to find her front door ajar. Inside, her home had been methodically ransacked. Her military awards were missing from their display case, along with her laptop containing case notes. The violation went beyond mere theft. This was intimidation, plain and simple. Captain Davis nearly paid a professional price for his loyalty. His promotion board mysteriously received concerns about his judgment in supporting an officer charged with assaulting police. Only his impeccable record and the intervention of an admiral who recognized the situation for what it was prevented a derailment of his career. The legal challenges mounted as well. Judge Howard Pierce's assignment to the case proved as problematic as expected. During preliminary hearings, he consistently ruled in favor of the prosecution, limiting the defense's access to Rhodes's disciplinary records and questioning the relevance of the Miltech connection. His ties to the police union became increasingly relevant when Rebecca discovered he had spoken at their annual fundraiser just 1 month before being assigned to Amara's case. Rebecca herself became a target. She arrived at her office one morning to find her windows shattered and case files scattered across the floor. Spray painted across her wall was the same word that had defaced Amara's home: criminal. More concerning was what was missing: notes from her conversations with potential witnesses. The message was clear: back off or escalation would continue. The evidence tampering reached new levels when Rebecca's expert analysis of the police dashcam footage revealed signs of digital manipulation. The timestamps don't match the metadata, the forensic technician explained. Someone edited this footage and tried to cover their tracks. Despite these challenges, their case was building. Zoe Parker's discreet investigation had identified 3 other whistleblowers who had experienced similar traffic stops after testifying against Miltech or its subsidiaries. None had Amara's training, and all had been successfully intimidated into silence. The pressure began to affect Amara's resolve. After her mother received threatening phone calls and her Navy colleagues faced increasing scrutiny, she questioned whether fighting was worth the collateral damage. Maybe I should take the plea, she suggested during a moment of doubt. 5 years, I've survived worse deployments. Rebecca gripped her shoulders firmly. That's exactly what they want, for you to surrender so this whole system can continue unchallenged. If you take that plea, you validate every action they've taken against you and others like you. Their determination was rewarded when Rebecca uncovered employment records confirming Rhodes had worked security specifically for Gregory Winters, Miltech's CEO, during his time with the company. This direct connection strengthened their case considerably, providing a clear motive for targeting Amara. As they built momentum, the opposition grew more desperate. Late one night, Zoe Parker called Amara, her voice tense with urgency. They found my sources inside the department. 2 officers just got suspended pending internal investigation. They're systematically cutting off our information channels. Her voice dropped lower. My editor received pressure from our parent companies, board to reassign me. Guess who sits on that board? Someone connected to Miltech, Amara guessed. Gregory Winters' brother-in-law. Zoe took a deep breath. I've backed up everything. If anything happens to me, it all goes public. But Amara, they're coming for you now, not just legally. I've heard chatter about manufacturing new evidence. Be careful. As Amara hung up, she stared out her window at the unmarked police car that had been surveilling her house for days. The battle lines were clearly drawn. What had begun as a traffic stop had evolved into a war against entrenched corruption that reached into every level of the system. She checked her home security system, knowing that the real threat wasn't just physical. It was the machinery of a justice system being manipulated to protect powerful interests at the expense of truth. The question wasn't if they would make their next move, but when and how devastating it would be. The pounding on Lieutenant Amara Johnson's door came at 4:17 in the morning, that disorienting hour when sleep is deepest and resistance at its lowest. 6 officers with a warrant, claiming they had evidence she had contacted Officer Rhodis via burner phone, threatening his family if he testified against her. The evidence was a phone found in her garbage can outside, with text messages sent to a number allegedly belonging to Rhodis. Amara recognized the tactic immediately. She'd never seen the phone before, and the trash can was accessible from the street. As they handcuffed her for the second time, she maintained her composure, knowing this desperate move signaled her opponents were feeling threatened by her case. Rebecca Chen was waiting at the station, having been tipped off by a court clerk, sympathetic to their cause. She immediately demanded an emergency hearing, presenting evidence that Amara's home had been under both official and unofficial surveillance. The prosecution would have us believe, she argued before a bleary-eyed Judge Pierce, that my client, knowing she was being watched 24 hours a day, decided to place threatening messages on a burner phone and then discard it in her own trash can rather than any of the thousands of public garbage bins in Chicago. This is not just implausible, it insults the court's intelligence. The fabricated evidence was so blatant that even Judge Pierce couldn't ignore it. He reluctantly ordered Amara's release, but added additional restrictions to her bail conditions. No contact with potential witnesses, daily check-ins with a probation officer, and an expanded exclusion zone that essentially confined her to her home and attorney's office. The humiliation of Officer Rhodis took an unexpected turn the following week. After months of doctors declaring his prognosis uncertain and potentially permanent, he appeared at a pre-trial hearing, walking with only the assistance of a cane. His miraculous recovery was celebrated by fellow officers and the media, with his wife tearfully attributing it to prayer and determination. Rebecca immediately filed motions for his complete medical records. This recovery trajectory is inconsistent with the spinal injury they've been claiming, explained the independent medical expert Rebecca had consulted. Either the initial diagnosis was dramatically overstated, or something doesn't add up with this recovery. The expert's suspicions were confirmed when they reviewed the actual medical files after a judge finally ordered their release. There was trauma, certainly, but nothing that indicated permanent paralysis. The actual diagnosis was a severe contusion with temporary neurological effects. Recovery was expected within 8 to 12 weeks with proper therapy. This revelation should have been a major victory, but the prosecution successfully argued to keep it from the jury, claiming medical privacy concerns. Meanwhile, the personal attacks escalated. Amara's mother, still recovering from her surgery, suffered a fall in her home that required hospitalization. The responding paramedics noted signs consistent with forced entry, though the police report mysteriously omitted these details. Captain Davis arranged for her transfer to a naval medical facility for protection. In a show of solidarity, members of Amara's SEAL unit arrived in Chicago on leave, creating an unofficial security detail around her and her team. Their presence, highly trained operators with combat experience, sent a clear message about the military's support for one of their own. The legal landscape grew more challenging when Rebecca's law firm began receiving pressure from major clients with connections to Miltech. The partners called me in today, she informed Amara during a strategy session. They suggested I hand your case to another attorney, citing concerns about my workload. Her expression hardened. I told them I'd resign first. They backed down, but I'm essentially operating solo now. The firm won't dedicate any additional resources to your case. Police Union President Michael Donovan made thinly veiled threats during a television interview, expressing concerns that anti-police sentiment encouraged by certain elements could lead to officers hesitating in dangerous situations. The implication was clear: support roaders or risk police protection in your neighborhood. Amid this pressure, Amara discovered surveillance devices in her home, sophisticated equipment that required expertise to install. Rebecca's tech expert confirmed they were law enforcement grade, but installed without proper warrants. Judge Pierce dismissed their concerns, suggesting Amara was being paranoid due to stress. The prosecution's jury selection strategy became evident as they systematically excluded black potential jurors and anyone with military connections. Rebecca countered by identifying jurors likely to recognize abuse of authority regardless of their background: teachers, healthcare workers, and those with personal experiences of systemic injustice. As the trial date approached, Amara's military training kicked in fully. She began viewing her situation as a mission behind enemy lines, requiring strategic thinking and counterintelligence. During a rare moment of privacy, she taught Rebecca basic counter-surveillance techniques she'd learned in special operations. "They're watching us, so we feed them what we want them to see," she explained, demonstrating how to check for listening devices and communicate securely. "In the field, when we're outnumbered, we don't just defend, we create confusion in the enemy ranks." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" Amara's expression shifted to one Rebecca hadn't seen before, the focused calm of a special operator planning a mission. "We stop playing defense now. They expect us to keep responding to their attacks, always one step behind. It's time we take control of the battlefield." The strategy session lasted until dawn, as they meticulously planned their counter-offensive against the forces that had aligned against them. By morning, both women understood their roles in the operation that would follow. This wasn't just about winning a court case anymore. It was about exposing a system of corruption that had operated unchecked for too long. As Rebecca departed, Amara stood at her window watching the unmarked surveillance vehicle across the street. For the first time since her arrest, she allowed herself a small smile. Her opponents had made a critical error. They had given a highly trained tactical operator nothing but time to plan their downfall. The final phase of her most important mission was about to begin. Lieutenant Amara Johnson and attorney Rebecca Chen sat across from each other at a small cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse, speaking just loudly enough to be overheard by the plainclothes officer poorly disguised at the next table. "The witness from the South Side is willing to testify about what he saw that night," Rebecca said, carefully placing emphasis on key words they'd previously agreed upon. "He has dashcam footage from his rideshare vehicle that shows the entire incident." Amara nodded, playing her part. "That could change everything. When can we meet him?" "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. at the Navy Pier. He's nervous about coming forward." The misinformation was planted. There was no witness, no dashcam footage, and certainly no meeting planned at Navy Pier. But by that evening, 3 unmarked police vehicles were stationed around the popular tourist destination, waiting for a person who would never appear. Meanwhile, investigative journalist Zoe Parker published her explosive article in the Tribune's Sunday edition, "Pattern of Targeting: How Chicago PD's Special Attention Program Profiles Minorities and Whistleblowers." The piece methodically exposed Officer Brendan Rhodes's history of excessive force complaints, all dismissed without investigation. It revealed the statistical evidence of his disproportionate stops of minority drivers and included testimonials from 3 former subjects of his traffic stops. Most damaging was the documented connection between Rhodes, Miltech Industries, and the specific division Lieutenant Johnson had testified against. The article sent shockwaves through the department. By Monday morning, Police Commissioner Sandra Martinez had announced an internal investigation into the Special Attention Program and Officer Rhodes's conduct. The backlash from the police union was immediate and fierce, but something unexpected happened. Anonymous officers began contacting Rebecca with supporting evidence. "I can't go public," one veteran officer wrote in an encrypted message, "but I've attached internal memos about the program. What happened to Lieutenant Johnson has happened to others. Most weren't able to defend themselves like she did." Rebecca received dozens of similar communications, officers disgusted by the corruption, but previously too intimidated to speak out. The dam was beginning to break. Amara's former SEAL teammates conducted their own unofficial investigation using skills honed in intelligence-gathering operations overseas. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Jackson, posing as a delivery driver, managed to place a legal recording device near where Officer Rhodis met regularly with his supporters. The resulting audio captured a damning conversation between Rhodis and District Attorney Reynolds. "Just stick to the story," Reynolds was heard saying. "The judge is with us and we've screened the jury pool. Johnson's military record won't matter if we keep hammering the dangerous trained killer angle." Rhodis's response was equally incriminating. "What about the connection to Miltech? If that gets out..." "It won't," Reynolds interrupted. "We've contained the leaks. Besides, without proof of direct orders to target her, it's all circumstantial." The recording, while potentially inadmissible in court, provided crucial intelligence about their opponent's strategy and vulnerabilities. The counterattack continued on multiple fronts. An anonymous source leaked Judge Howard Pierce's financial records to the Judicial Review Board, revealing substantial investments in companies owned by Miltech subsidiaries, a clear conflict of interest he had failed to disclose. While the review board moved with typical bureaucratic slowness, the revelation created public pressure for Pierce to recuse himself. The corruption was being exposed layer by layer, but the danger escalated proportionally. One night, as Amara walked the short distance from her attorney's office to her car, two men in hoodies approached from behind. Their movements, direct, coordinated, purposeful, triggered her combat instincts. She dropped her briefcase as the first attacker lunged, using his momentum against him with a swift redirection that sent him sprawling. The second attacker produced a knife, slashing with practiced technique that revealed professional training. Amara blocked with her forearm, accepting a shallow cut to create an opening for a decisive strike to his solar plexus. Both men fled, when a passing car slowed to observe the confrontation. Though disguised as a mugging, Amara recognized a professional hit attempt. She photographed the blood on her arm before treating the wound, documenting everything for potential evidence. Rebecca, meanwhile, executed a brilliant legal maneuver to force disclosure of the unaltered dashcam footage. She filed a motion arguing that since the prosecution had referenced the dashcam in establishing their timeline of events, they had effectively entered it into evidence and could not selectively withhold portions that might contradict their narrative. Judge Pierce reluctantly granted the motion after Rebecca made it clear she would immediately appeal any denial, potentially exposing his conflicts of interest to appellate review. The pressure on potential allies of Lieutenant Johnson intensified. Police Union President Michael Donovan issued thinly veiled threats to officers who might support her. "In these difficult times, we must remember who stands with us and who stands against us. The thin blue line tolerates no betrayal." Despite these intimidation tactics, support for Amara grew as her true military record circulated through veteran networks and social media. The narrative of a decorated Navy SEAL being prosecuted for defending herself against a corrupt officer resonated with millions of Americans across the political spectrum. Rebecca's investigation into Judge Pierce deepened, revealing a pattern of favorable rulings in cases involving Miltech or its interests. Most significantly, she discovered regular payments from a consulting firm to Pierce's wife, a firm created just 3 months after Miltech won its first defense contract. The evidence of judicial corruption was mounting, but using it required perfect timing. Their carefully orchestrated counteroffensive reached its climax when Amara herself neutralized an unexpected threat. A man claiming to be a plumber gained access to her building, but his tools and behavior triggered her suspicions. She monitored him until he attempted to enter her apartment using professional lock-picking tools. The confrontation was brief and decisive. Minutes later, Amara stood over the unconscious intruder, phone in hand, as she contacted both police and Rebecca. The plumber carried false identification, but his fingerprints revealed connections to a security contractor frequently employed by Miltech. More importantly, his phone contained messages discussing ensuring the lieutenant receives an appropriate message. The attempted intimidation had instead provided them with concrete evidence of the conspiracy against her. As police took the intruder into custody, Amara exchanged a meaningful look with Rebecca. Their counterattack was working. The opposition was making mistakes, growing desperate as their corruption faced exposure. The trial was set to begin in 48 hours, and for the first time since her arrest, Lieutenant Amara Johnson allowed herself to believe that justice might actually be possible. Do you believe the system is rigged against people like Lieutenant Johnson? Comment number 1 if you think powerful corporations should be held accountable for using law enforcement to target whistleblowers. Hit that like button if you believe Amara's military training saved her life during this orchestrated persecution. Are you subscribed to see how this explosive courtroom drama concludes? What do you think will happen when the unaltered dashcam footage is finally revealed? Will Judge Pierce be forced to recuse himself when his corruption is exposed? Let's see how the trial unfolds as we continue this shocking true story. The morning of the trial dawned with a surreal energy surrounding the Cook County Courthouse. Barricades separated opposing protesters, police supporters on one side wearing blue ribbons and holding "Back the Blue" signs, while justice reform advocates and military veterans gathered on the opposite side with "Stand with Lieutenant Johnson" banners. News vans lined the street, reporters jockeying for the best position to capture Lieutenant Amara Johnson's arrival. Inside, the courtroom was packed to capacity, with overflow rooms set up with video feeds. Judge Howard Pierce, still presiding, despite mounting questions about his impartiality, called the court to order with a sharp bang of his gavel. District Attorney Victor Reynolds approached the podium for his opening statement, his tailored suit and confident demeanor crafted to project authority. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice resonating through the hushed courtroom, "this case is about a police officer who now faces life in a wheelchair because Lieutenant Amara Johnson decided her military training placed her above the law." Reynolds paced deliberately before the jury box. Officer Brendan Rhodes, a decorated 12-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, was simply conducting a routine traffic stop when Lieutenant Johnson used specialized combat techniques to break his spine. He projected a photograph of Rhodes in his hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment. "The defense will try to distract you with conspiracy theories and irrelevant military accolades. But the facts are simple. An officer gave lawful commands and the defendant responded with violence that forever changed his life." Reynolds concluded with practiced solemnity. "By the end of this trial, you will see that no one, regardless of their military rank or service, has the right to attack a police officer performing his duty. We ask that you deliver justice for Officer Rhodes and his family." As Reynolds returned to his seat, Rebecca Chen approached the podium with measured confidence. Her opening statement took a dramatically different approach. "This case isn't about a routine traffic stop gone wrong," she began, making eye contact with each juror. "It's about a deliberate targeting of a whistleblower who exposed corruption that cost American lives." Rebecca displayed Lieutenant Johnson's military photograph. In full dress uniform, Commander Amara Johnson has spent 18 years defending our country as one of the first female Navy SEALs in American history. 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star for valor. She has repeatedly risked her life to protect American lives and interests. Rebecca's voice hardened. 2 weeks before the incident in question, Lieutenant Johnson testified in a federal investigation against Miltech Industries for providing substandard equipment that resulted in troop casualties. Officer Brendan Rhodes previously worked security for the exact same division of Miltech that Lieutenant Johnson's testimony damaged. She let that connection sink in before continuing. "The evidence will show that Lieutenant Johnson was specifically targeted as retaliation, that Officer Rhodes escalated a fabricated traffic stop into a life-threatening situation, and that Lieutenant Johnson responded with the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat, exactly as her military training required." Rebecca concluded by addressing the central question. "This case will ultimately ask you to decide, When a citizen is unlawfully threatened by someone abusing their authority, do they have the right to defend themselves? Even when that authority figure wears a badge. The Constitution and case law are clear. The answer is yes. The prosecution's case began with Officer Brendan Rhodes himself, who entered the courtroom walking slowly with a cane, his movements suggesting significant discomfort. He took the stand with a grimace, positioning himself as a sympathetic figure before a single question was asked. Under Reynolds' gentle questioning, Rhodes presented himself as a dedicated officer who had simply been performing his duty. "I observed the defendant's vehicle with a non-functioning taillight and moving slightly above the speed limit," he testified. "When I approached, she immediately became confrontational, questioning my authority to stop her." Rhodes described how Amara allegedly refused to comply with standard requests for documentation. "When I asked her to step out of the vehicle, a perfectly legal request during any traffic stop, she became increasingly agitated. I feared she might have a weapon, given her hostile attitude." His voice caught with emotion as he described the attack. "Without warning, she lunged at me. I felt something strike my neck, then my legs just gave out. I remember lying on the ground, unable to move, watching her stand over me." Reynolds guided him through the aftermath. Months of painful rehabilitation, the strain on his family, the uncertainty of whether he would walk again. "Even now," Rhodes said, gesturing to his cane, "I have permanent nerve damage. Some days I can barely get out of bed." When Rebecca rose for cross-examination, her approach was surgical. "Officer Rhodes, you testified that Lieutenant Johnson's taillight was out, correct?" "Yes, that's why I initiated the stop." Rebecca displayed a photograph taken of Amara's vehicle at the police impound lot the night of her arrest. "Can you point to which taillight was non-functional?" Rhodes hesitated. "The right one, but it appears to be working in this photo because it was intermittent." "Intermittent," Rebecca repeated skeptically, "and yet no diagnostic test at the impound lot found any electrical issues with either taillight." She moved on quickly. "You also testified that Lieutenant Johnson became immediately confrontational. Did you activate your body camera during this confrontational encounter as required by department policy?" "I did, but as I've stated previously, it malfunctioned." "How convenient," Judge Pierce interrupted. "Counsel will refrain from editorial comments." Rebecca nodded. "Officer Rhodes, in the past 12 months, how many traffic stops have you conducted of black drivers compared to white drivers?" "Objection," Reynolds stood, "irrelevant and prejudicial." "Your Honor," Rebecca countered, "the prosecution has portrayed this as a routine traffic stop. The pattern of Officer Rhodes's stops goes directly to whether this was indeed routine or targeted harassment." Judge Pierce scowled. "I'll allow limited questioning on this topic." Rebecca presented statistical evidence from the department's own records, showing Rhodes's disproportionate targeting of minority drivers. When questioned about his previous employment with Miltech Industries, Rhodes claimed it was just a summer job with no connection to the traffic stop in question. The cross-examination reached its climax when Rebecca asked directly, "Officer Rhodes, were you aware that Lieutenant Johnson had testified against your former employer just 2 weeks before you stopped her?" "Objection," Reynolds nearly shouted. "Assumes facts not in evidence and implies a conspiracy with no foundation." Judge Pierce sustained the objection, but the question had achieved its purpose, planting the connection in the jurors' minds. The prosecution's case continued with testimony from responding officers and medical experts who described Rhodes's injuries. Throughout, Judge Pierce consistently sustained prosecution objections while overruling defense objections, creating a clearly uneven playing field. The bias became even more apparent when the prosecution introduced a surprise witness, a man claiming to have witnessed the entire incident from a nearby bus stop. "I saw everything," the witness testified confidently. "The officer was nothing but professional. The lady just went crazy and attacked him for no reason." During cross-examination, Rebecca asked, "Mr. Williams, where exactly were you standing during this incident?" He pointed to a location on the evidence photographs. "Rebecca, then produced bus route schedules and security footage from a building across the street. There is no bus stop where you claim to have been standing, Mr. Williams, and this security footage shows no one at that location during the entire incident. Would you like to reconsider your testimony before I ask about your 3 previous arrests and your connection to Officer Rhodes's brother-in-law? The witness's credibility collapsed as he stammered through contradictory explanations. When Rebecca moved to have his testimony stricken, Judge Pierce reluctantly agreed. But the damage to the prosecution's case was significant. As Amara's mother took the stand to testify about the pattern of harassment following her daughter's arrest, she spoke with quiet dignity about police cars constantly driving past her home, anonymous threatening calls, and her accidental fall that occurred after 2 unknown men were seen near her house. Her testimony humanized Amara and suggested a coordinated intimidation campaign. The day ended with a bombshell when Rebecca revealed text messages from the would-be intruder's phone, directly connecting him to the police union president. Judge Pierce immediately called both attorneys to the bench, his face flushed with anger. Ms. Chen, approach these conspiracy allegations again, and I'll hold you in contempt. Rebecca stood her ground. Your Honor, these aren't allegations. They're evidence properly obtained during a legal arrest for breaking and entering. The jury has the right to hear all relevant evidence. As court adjourned for the day, the mood had shifted perceptibly. Several jurors were now openly watching Judge Pierce with skepticism, noting his increasingly transparent bias. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca received a text message from an unknown number. Parking garage, level 3, proof you need. She showed the message to Amara, both women recognizing that the next piece of evidence could change everything if they could obtain it safely and if Judge Pierce could be compelled to admit it. The battle for justice was reaching its critical phase, with forces still working actively to prevent the truth from emerging. But for the first time, cracks were appearing in the wall of opposition that had seemed so impenetrable just days before. Rebecca Chen arrived at the parking garage alone, her hand gripping the panic button Captain Davis had given her, connected directly to the Navy SEAL team standing by nearby. Level 3 was dimly lit, with several empty parking spaces and no visible security cameras, both concerning and advantageous for a clandestine meeting. She checked her watch. 11:45 p.m. The courthouse had closed hours ago, but her mysterious contact had insisted on this location and timing. Ms. Chen. The voice came from behind a concrete pillar. A figure emerged, a uniformed police officer she recognized from the courthouse security detail. Officer Ramirez, she acknowledged cautiously, you're taking quite a risk. Officer Elena Ramirez glanced nervously around the garage. I have 10 years until retirement. If they discover I'm here, that's gone. But I can't keep watching this. She handed Rebecca a flash drive. The complete, unaltered dashcam footage from Officer Rhodes's patrol car. The original was never corrupted. It was deliberately suppressed because it contradicts everything Rhodes claimed in his report and testimony. Rebecca's pulse quickened. How did you get this? I work in technical services. We maintain the dashcam database. When I saw the official report claiming corruption, I knew something was wrong. I kept a copy before the original was replaced with the edited version. Ramirez stepped back into the shadows. I was never here. You never saw me. But that footage shows exactly what happened to Lieutenant Johnson. Back in her office, Rebecca and Amara watched the footage with growing vindication. The video clearly showed Rhodes following Amara's vehicle for several blocks before activating his lights, contradicting his claim that he noticed a traffic violation in passing. His approach to her vehicle was aggressive from the start, his hand already resting on his weapon. Most damning was the audio, capturing Rhodes saying, "Let's see how tough you Navy types really are." And later, as the situation escalated, "You should have kept your mouth shut about Miltech." The footage showed Amara maintaining perfect composure and compliance until Rhodes drew his weapon while she was retrieving her registration, exactly as she had testified. Her defensive moves were clearly reactive and controlled, designed to neutralize the threat with minimal force. By morning, Rebecca had assembled a comprehensive motion to admit the new evidence, citing precedents for allowing evidence discovered mid-trial when it fundamentally affected the integrity of the proceedings. Judge Howard Pierce, as expected, resisted vigorously. This alleged footage has no established chain of custody. We have no way to verify its authenticity or whether it's been tampered with. Rebecca was prepared. Your Honor, we request an immediate forensic examination by an independent expert. The metadata will confirm whether this is the original footage from that night. Reynolds objected strenuously. This is a desperate attempt by the defense to introduce manufactured evidence. The official record clearly establishes the dashcam malfunctioned. The legal battle raged for hours, with Judge Pierce searching for any procedural grounds to exclude the footage. His desperation became increasingly apparent, drawing concerned looks from several jurors. Meanwhile, outside the EI courtroom, a different battle was unfolding. Investigative journalist Zoe Parker had obtained a copy of the footage and published an article detailing its contents, including transcripts of the damning audio. The story went viral, creating immense public pressure for transparency. Social media exploded with demands for the footage to be admitted, and protesters outside the courthouse grew to thousands, chanting for justice. Inside the court, Judge Pierce was still refusing to allow the footage when a court officer approached the bench with a message. His face paled as he read it. Without explanation, he called a 1-hour recess. When court resumed, an ashen-faced Pierce announced, "In light of new information brought to the court's attention, I am recusing myself from this case due to previously undisclosed conflicts of interest." The bombshell announcement sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Rebecca later learned that the Judicial Review Board had expedited their investigation into Pierce's financial ties to Miltech and issued an ultimatum: recuse voluntarily or face public removal. Judge Elaine Torres, a respected Latina jurist with a reputation for impartiality, was assigned to take over the case. Her first action was to grant the defense motion for forensic examination of the dashcam footage. When experts confirmed its authenticity, she ruled it admissible over Reynolds's increasingly desperate objections. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played on multiple screens. Jurors watched with rapt attention as the reality of what happened that night unfolded before them, contradicting virtually every claim Officer Rhodes had made under oath. In the wake of this revelation, Reynolds attempted a desperate maneuver, filing a motion to dismiss all charges rather than allow the trial to continue with the damaging new evidence. "The state no longer wishes to pursue this matter," he announced, avoiding eye contact with either the judge or the defendant. Judge Torres saw through the strategy immediately. "Mr. Reynolds, this court will not allow the prosecution to dismiss charges simply to avoid the introduction of exculpatory evidence that may expose misconduct. The motion is denied. This trial will continue." With their narrative collapsing, the prosecution's case unraveled rapidly. Sullivan's previous victims, emboldened by the public attention and the dashcam footage, came forward with nearly identical stories of aggressive stops, racial slurs, and threats. 3 were willing to testify, describing a pattern of behavior that matched Amara's experience precisely. The medical subplot reached its climax when Rebecca successfully subpoenaed Rhodes's complete medical records. Under questioning, his neurologist admitted the injury had been classified as temporary from the beginning, with expected full recovery within 6 to 8 weeks. The portrayal of permanent disability had been a deliberate exaggeration designed to increase sympathy and potential damages. Police Union President Michael Donovan was caught on a courthouse security camera threatening a potential witness, resulting in his removal from office pending investigation. With each new revelation, public sentiment shifted dramatically in Amara's favor, and the systematic nature of the corruption became impossible to ignore. The defense case reached its emotional peak when Lieutenant Amara Johnson finally took the stand. Dressed in her full Navy uniform adorned with service medals, she presented a striking figure of dignity and service. Under Rebecca's questioning, she explained her actions that night with the calm precision of a trained operator. "I was taught to use minimum necessary force to neutralize threats," she testified. Officer Rhodes had drawn his weapon without justification during a traffic stop. He had explicitly referenced my testimony against Miltech. Based on my training and the imminent threat to my life, I took the least violent action available to me to prevent the use of deadly force. During cross-examination, a visibly frustrated Reynolds attempted to portray her as a dangerous weapon who had overreacted. "So you admit you used specialized combat techniques against a police officer?" "I used the same defensive techniques taught to police officers," Amara replied evenly. "The difference is that I applied them with restraint and precision, specifically to prevent serious injury while stopping the threat." As the defense rested its case, Amara leaned over to Rebecca, her voice barely audible. "Whatever happens, we exposed them. That matters." Rebecca squeezed her hand in response. "It does, but we're not done fighting yet." The closing arguments presented two irreconcilable narratives. Reynolds, his case in shambles, focused on the narrow legal question of whether any civilian had the right to physically resist a police officer, regardless of circumstances. Rebecca's closing was a masterpiece that wove together the evidence of targeting, the dashcam footage, the Miltech connection, and the fundamental constitutional right to self-defense. Lieutenant Johnson was targeted because she spoke truth to power, she concluded. When that truth couldn't be silenced through legal means, she faced escalating intimidation that culminated in a life-threatening situation. She responded exactly as her training dictated, with precision, restraint, and respect for human life. The question before you isn't whether she defended herself. The dashcam footage makes that clear. The question is whether any American, even one wearing a uniform, different from Officer Rhodes's, has the right to defend themselves against unlawful aggression. Our legal system, our Constitution, and our most basic human rights all affirm that the answer is yes. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, the courtroom remained packed. Nobody wanted to miss the verdict in a case that had exposed layers of corruption and raised fundamental questions about accountability, race, and justice in America. For Lieutenant Amara Johnson, the wait would be the final test of the resilience that had carried her through combat zones, through 18 years of service in a male-dominated elite military unit, and through a system that had been manipulated to destroy her for the crime of speaking truth. The jury deliberations stretched over 3 agonizing days. Outside the courthouse, the crowds grew larger and more diverse, veterans in uniform standing alongside activists, military families next to community organizers, all united in their call for justice. Inside her apartment, Lieutenant Amara Johnson prepared herself mentally for either outcome. 18 years of military service had taught her to face reality unflinchingly, to accept what couldn't be changed while fighting fiercely for what could. Rebecca Chen called each evening, reviewing possible scenarios and next steps regardless of the verdict. "If they convict," she explained, "we have multiple grounds for appeal: Judge Pierce's bias, the initially suppressed evidence, the coordinated intimidation campaign." Amara appreciated the legal strategy, but found herself strangely at peace. "The truth is out now," she told Rebecca. "Whatever 12 people in that jury room decide, they can't change what we've exposed." On the morning of the 4th day, the court officer's message arrived. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled to capacity within an hour. Officer Brendan Rhodes sat with the prosecution team. His cane, prominently displayed despite the medical records now showing his injury, had fully healed months ago. District Attorney Victor Reynolds projected confidence, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed his uncertainty. Judge Torres called the court to order, with a solemn rap of her gavel. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied, handing a folded paper to the court officer. The silence was absolute as Judge Torres unfolded the paper, her expression giving nothing away as she read it. In the matter of the state versus Lieutenant Amara Johnson, on the charge of aggravated assault on a police officer, the jury finds the defendant. The courtroom collectively held its breath. "Not guilty." Gasps and muffled cheers erupted before Judge Torres could continue. On the charge of resisting arrest, the jury finds the defendant not guilty. On the charge of attempting to evade a lawful traffic stop, The jury finds the defendant not guilty. The judge looked up. The defendant is acquitted on all charges. The controlled decorum of the courtroom dissolved as supporters embraced each other. Amara remained composed, years of military discipline evident in her posture, though Rebecca could see the relief in her eyes. Across the courtroom, Officer Rhodes's reaction proved more revealing than any testimony. As the verdict was read, his face contorted with rage. He suddenly stood up straight, forgetting his performance of disability, and slammed his cane against the table before storming toward the exit, without any sign of the limp or physical limitation he'd displayed throughout the trial. Several jurors visibly reacted to this demonstration of his deception. Judge Torres, observing this display, made an unprecedented decision. Officer Brendan Rhodes approached the bench immediately. When a startled Rhodes complied, she continued, "In light of the evidence presented during this trial and your conduct just now, I am ordering an immediate investigation into your testimony, which appears to constitute perjury. Bailiff, please ensure Officer Rhodes remains in the courthouse until investigators arrive." She turned to the district attorney. "Mr. Reynolds, I am also referring this matter to the State Bar Association for review of potential prosecutorial misconduct in this case." The systematic dismantling of the corrupt machinery began immediately. Within a week, Lieutenant Amara Johnson was reinstated to active duty with a formal apology from the Navy, which had stood by her throughout the ordeal but was now free to publicly acknowledge the injustice she had faced. Captain Marcus Davis personally delivered her reinstatement papers along with news of her promotion to commander. Media coverage shifted dramatically, with in-depth investigations into systemic racism in policing. Major networks ran special reports on the Johnson case as an example of both institutional failure and the possibility of accountability. District Attorney Victor Reynolds faced disbarment proceedings for his role in suppressing evidence and pursuing a case he knew to be fraudulent. Subsequent investigations revealed a pattern of similar misconduct in other cases involving police officers, particularly those with connections to powerful interests like Miltech Industries. The Chicago Police Department, under intense public and political pressure, implemented mandatory bias training and comprehensive reforms. The Special Attention Program was dismantled entirely, and an independent commission was established to review all cases involving officers with excessive force complaints. Officer Rhodes ultimately pleaded guilty to perjury and fraud charges related to his testimony and disability claims. The plea deal required him to fully disclose the chain of events that led to Amara being targeted, implicating several high-ranking officials in the process. The most meaningful outcome for Amara was the establishment of the Johnson Foundation for Justice Accountability, created with the settlement she received from the city and police department. The foundation provided legal representation to victims of police misconduct who lacked the resources or platform to fight back effectively. Rebecca Chen partnered with the foundation, bringing her legal expertise and passion for justice to help others facing similar battles. 1 month after the verdict, Amara visited her mother's home in the South Side. The street had changed subtly, but significantly. The police cars that once slowed menacingly when passing now maintained a respectful distance. Officers at the local precinct, many of whom had supported the exposure of corruption, nodded in recognition when she passed. The systemic issues remained enormous, but in this small corner of Chicago, accountability had gained a foothold. As Amara prepared to return to duty, her phone rang with an unexpected call. The new Secretary of the Navy was personally requesting her to lead a special task force investigating corruption in military contracts, including ongoing issues with Miltech Industries and similar contractors. Her experience, both as a SEAL and as someone who had faced retaliation for speaking truth, made her uniquely qualified for the assignment. 1 week later, Commander Amara Johnson stood before an assembled unit of carefully selected officers and intelligence specialists. Looking at their faces, diverse in gender, race, and background but united in purpose, she felt a profound sense of responsibility and possibility. "Justice isn't guaranteed," she told them, her voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "It's something we fight for every single day. Some of you might question why we're taking on this mission after what happened the last time someone challenged these powerful interests. She paused, meeting each person's gaze directly. We do it because the alternative is surrendering to corruption. We do it because silence equals complicity. And we do it because we took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As the briefing continued, Amara recognized that her most important battle hadn't been on foreign soil, or even in that Chicago courtroom. It had been the decision, made repeatedly through the darkest moments, to stand firm when surrender would have been easier. That was the lesson she hoped would echo beyond her individual case, that systems only change when brave individuals refuse to be broken by them. What do you think about Commander Johnson's fight against corruption? Has her story inspired you to stand up against injustice in your own community? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can create more accountability in our justice system. If you believe that no one should be above the law, not even those who enforce it, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of courage in the face of systemic injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's refusal to back down can change an entire system. Thank you for joining me for this powerful journey through combat and courtroom. I'm grateful for each of you who stayed until the end of this important story. The story of Lieutenant Amara Johnson illuminates profound truths about justice and courage in modern America. First, systems of power protect themselves. Institutional corruption thrives when accountability fails. Second, a single brave individual can catalyze change by refusing to surrender to intimidation. Johnson's military discipline and unwavering commitment to truth became her greatest weapons against a coordinated campaign to destroy her. Third, authentic allyship matters enormously. Without Rebecca Chen's legal brilliance, Officer Ramirez's moral courage, and Captain Davis's unwavering support, Johnson's truth might never have emerged. Fourth, justice requires persistence. The system is designed to exhaust those who challenge. Fifth, exposure is powerful. Corruption withers under scrutiny. The dashcam footage revealed not just what happened that night, but exposed an entire network of abuse. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the battle against systemic injustice isn't won in a single courtroom or with one verdict. Johnson's foundation and continued work targeting corruption demonstrate that true change requires sustained effort. Her story reminds us that justice isn't granted. It's fought for day by those brave enough to stand against powerful interests and systems designed to silence them. Has Lieutenant Johnson's fight against corruption and racism inspired you to examine the justice system in your own community? What would you do if faced with the choice between speaking truth to power or maintaining a comfortable silence? Comment below with the one lesson from this story that resonated most with you. If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when the system is stacked against you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Share this video with someone struggling to find the strength to confront injustice in their own life. Remember, as Commander Johnson demonstrated, sometimes one person's refusal to back down can change an entire system. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey through combat and courtroom. May we all find a fraction of Amara Johnson's courage when our own moments of truth arrive.